many people know, I've done, I think, 117 tour stops between the Unity Tour and the Truth Tour, and had some fantastic guests and so on and so forth. This gentleman, actually, it must have been divine because I met him at our final stop, which was in Tampa, and I met him off stage. We were in a conversation in the audience, and very appealing because, as many of you know, I I have a belief system that there's young talent out there that is so more accelerated than we think we are right now, that we're going to be in very, very good hands moving forward. And I spoke to this gentleman for a little bit. He does a lot of fantastic work, and I want to introduce him. And I'm thinking what we could do is I'm gonna let him roll. But Robert, Bruce, just jump in and ask any questions, because us in the audience, it's time to get to know this gentleman, and as I call them, young guns. So let me bring on, and if I butcher your name, Cory, I apologize, but Cory Endrulat. Am I close?
Yeah, no, you got it. Cory Endrulat.
Awesome. Beautiful. So good to have you here, Cory.
Thank you. I appreciate it. Thank you for putting this thing on, all of you guys. I really appreciate it. And yeah, I must have been divine because I heard about it too, my friend, last minute. I was like, wait, there's this tour going on in Tampa. I'm near Tampa. I got to go. And so it was incredible. And I went to your tour and I met also some other young people who had a very similar vision to me. We've kept in contact, and now I'm getting involved with the local colleges in the area to try to see if we can do an event on site. I already do events outside the college with a lot of older folks, and they say, where are all the younger people? I'm like, where are your kids? And they're like, well, I don't know. I mean, they're resistant to some of the ideas we have to share. And, I don't know how to talk to my kids, or I don't know where the young people are. They're on their smartphones. They're not paying attention to what's going on in the world. They're asleep. And I've met a lot of folks who actually seem to be quite inspired, who see that the world is turning very tyrannical in many parts of the world, not just here in America. And it's definitely inspiring for me to see, because when I connect with my own generation, I can sympathize with a lot of their problems, a lot of depression, a lot of anxiety. They're having to pay a lot of costs for tuition to go to school, and then that school system, of course, indoctrinates them further most of the time. And some of them start to see that. A lot of them are looking at influencers such as yourself, and they're finding them online, and they're like, wait, they're opening up a whole new world of knowledge, of stuff I was not taught about in school. And for me, when I was 13, I was researching ingredients in the store with my phone at the time. I had like an iPod Touch or whatever, and I was like researching ingredients, and then got into nutrition, 14, 18, got into politics in 2016 with Trump and a lot of that momentum that brought me into freedom. And I started to realize that freedom is just as important as health, if not more important, the precursor to health. I became a health coach and was actually starting to take clients. And, it was much easier than going through 8 years of schooling and ending up in loads of debt and becoming a doctor, which I originally wanted to do, by the way. But I was very passionate about health from the very beginning, and it led me down this road to where now I'm talking about psychology, history, and philosophy mainly. And that's where I see the roots are to this problem. Now, I don't want to just be another spokesperson. I don't want to be just another person who shares, a different worldview, or necessarily even talks about myself. I don't like to. In fact, I don't even usually wear this type of get up. I usually wear something a bit more casual, but it's because I'm recording for a huge medical project that has never been done before in history regarding the nature of authoritarianism and totalitarianism and the psychology of what's really going on with statism, a belief system that very few individuals within the independent media know about, which, my goal is to bring it to their awareness, and also the alternatives such as voluntarism and permaculture, which I see are the ideas of the future. And if anybody listening who does not know those ideas, I highly recommend you do, because they're root targeting and unifying. So for anybody in health, they say, hey, we got to fix the world. There's a lot of tyranny going on. They say, we got to look at RFK. We got to get involved with this administration. I say, no, actually. Get to the root cause. Just as you would do in your medical practice, there is a belief system that's happening on a wide scale through a mass psychosis, mass hysteria, and we detail it through healthrevealed.org, a team of medical whistleblowers I brought together, and we're going to be inviting the public and doing a lot of outreach Similarly, with the permaculture going on here in Florida, I wrote a book here with Jim Gail and several others who are leaders of different industries, some of which you guys might know. Marjorie Wildcraft, who's a preparedness leader and best-selling author. Joel Salatin, one of the leading regenerative farmers in America, actually offered to the USDA position. Kevin Fretz, McKinley Halati, 3D printed buildings, leaders in organics. Pat Miletich, a UFC world champion. I spoke with these individuals. We wrote a book together called Natural Intelligence, where we detail permaculture and voluntarism and how we can transform our lawns, and literally it's right in front of us, into food-producing powerhouses. We need to put the action in both physically and mentally, morally, spiritually. Right, the 3D aligned to the 5D, the feminine aligned to the masculine, all these different aspects. And so a lot of my work goes into this. That's why I also wrote about Taoism, which is known as one of the first liberty-oriented philosophies. If you're not familiar with the Tao Te Ching, second most translated work in the world after the Christian Bible. For all you Christians out there, you might want to look into it. Also, the first form of anarchism, which is associated with voluntarism. But these folks are very different than what you would think anarchy is. In fact, anarchy just means no rulers, not no rules. And you know who were the first anarchists in history? The American abolitionists, who were actually true freedom fighters, not our American founding fathers, many of which were not present during the signing of the Constitution. Many of which, were slave owners, many of which actually had problems, basically trying to get out of the monarchy, which I respect. I think it's a moving step forward in our evolution, but the abolitionists recognize we need to go a step further. That's why they understood voluntarism. That's why they set up the Underground Railroad. They set up towns where they were willing to break the law in order to free slaves, to help them escape. We are exactly paralleling what the abolitionists in America are doing, and I don't think they get a lot of credit. So I broke down the nature of slavery in this book, the psychology of it, trauma, abuse, fear, all the aspects of it. If you're unfamiliar with the Stanley Milgram experiment, average good people do the most amount of evil in this world. They believe so wholeheartedly in what they're doing is good, and that is precisely actually part of the reason why they're doing the most amount of evil. The number one cause of death in this world is not heart disease or cancer, it's democide, death by government. In the last, 50, 100 years, look at World War II as an example. How many deaths occurred from Nazi Germany, Stalin, Russia, and how many people worshiped them and said, oh my gosh, you're fixing the economy, you're doing great, and Hitler, you're going to save us from communism. The cycle of history has always been that government has been, by the nature of, and has created other forms of slavery. And it will always be based on war, capture, slavery. The same way as you make a slave is the same way as you create a government. This is not a coincidence. These two systems go hand in hand, which is why the very pro-slavery advocates were also the most pro-government, and which is why the abolitionists were called utopian and radical for simply wanting people to live their own lives in peace and for free, living lives of true freedom. So I know I just shared a bunch of ideas with you guys, but a lot of this is information that people do not look into, and I'm willing to open that conversation. We don't learn about Lysander Spooner in school. We don't learn about how Thomas Paine was outcasted by the other American founding fathers, or how Patrick Henry spoke up against the Constitution. There's a lot of people in the freedom crowd who care about freedom, but they attach to these different worldviews and ideologies. I'm not here with an ideology. I'm not here to claim I have the truth. I want people to simply live their own lives in peace, which means I don't impose my will on you. I don't claim that I have an ideology, whether it's conservatism or liberalism or anarchism, whatever, and say this is the way everybody should live their own lives. I want people to live truly free, which means we need a moral shift in our consciousness to recognize that. That's going to take us getting beyond our superstitions and our limiting belief systems that says this is the way it has to be done. We've been doing it for thousands of years, my friend.
Yeah, no, it's so true. It's beautiful. What I've noticed is the let's call them whatever, the establishment, the bad guys, the cabal, whatever people want, whatever label they want to slap on them. They've done a heck of a job convincing us that we need a leader, which is actually counterintuitive to what we really need. Let's talk about real quick, because I think it's fascinating, and it seems like you have some knowledge on this. Let's talk about the Thomas Paine versus the founding fathers, because there was some friction there that I think many people aren't aware of.
Yeah, in fact, actually, several founding fathers noticed in Massachusetts there wasn't a government, and yet there was peace. It was going against a lot of their understandings at the time. I have a lot of the quotes in my book from Thomas Paine and other founding fathers, which people have not dug up. And I find it deeply intriguing. Go to artofliberty.org. He has a whole article on the Constitution and the shady history of it. Art of Liberty. He's got a whole book with pictures showing how all these different governments throughout history have parallels in their systems, in the way that they indoctrinate their citizens. Because in order to have a government, you need to create this vested authority in man, where you say this person has more rights than everybody else. You have to obey them above your conscience, and do what you're told, despite it being potentially wrong. And this is precisely why people were order followers and carrying out the orders of Hitler and Stalin. It's not the one person who gives the order, it's that follow. So Thomas Paine, he was really a revolutionary. He started that Declaration of Independence by handing out brochures and pamphlets, all throughout Americas to get the Declaration of Independence. But then even after the Declaration, he was doing work and saying, hey, we got to be careful here. What are we doing? We're trying to create a whole new system. What is the system based off of? It's still based off the old system of doing things, where we create an authority in man, and we say these people have less rights, these people have more rights, these people get to decide how to live each other's own lives. And I think that is very dangerous. So Thomas Paine was one of the few people who started to spot up on that. And the abolitionists were really honing in on that, because they just found so many hypocrisies. And they actually publicly burned the Constitution and said it's a covenant of death in agreement with hell. And these were Christians. These were Christian pacifists, right, who were deeply Christian, very spiritual in their thinking. And I know a lot of folks in the freedom community, this is where they come from. So read the abolitionist literature. People like Aidan Ballou, look at his document, Moral Power versus Political Power, and how moral power is superior to political power by every means possible. Because the abolitionists also didn't partake in politics to change the world. They recognized that you had to change the hearts and minds of people to recognize that slavery is wrong. You couldn't just pass a law and write down on a piece of paper, say slavery is wrong, and therefore everybody is going to agree that slavery is wrong. They recognized there had to be education involved. There had to be a shift. And that required getting past a slave system for thousands of years, that slavery was perfectly normal, necessary for the economy, and without the slaves, who will pick the cotton? Well, without government, who will build the roads? So there were people throughout history that recognized this. And yes, I would say Thomas Paine is one of those individuals who was very out there in the front lines, and it got him into a lot of trouble. He actually got jailed and had to be brought out of the jail system. And then Washington did raids on whiskey rebellions. You can look that up, with thousands of soldiers. So these people are not what we think they are. And of course, I didn't live in that time, so I don't even know what exactly happened, but I'm not going to stay in the past. Just like your previous speaker said, I want to stay in the present. Well, let's look at the ever present. Let's look at the natural law, which is that which these American founding fathers talked about. Well, if all men are created equal, why do we give certain people the right to rule? Where does this right to rule come from? It comes from Sumeria 6,000 years ago, where they say this divine right of kings gave me the right.
I'm looking forward to it. I'm going to be hosting along with my friend Louis Herms and
Hey, Robert, there's a video playing in the background, just so you know that we can hear. So, Cory, you know what I find interesting too is if people were to step back and read the preamble of the Constitution and the preamble of Declaration of Independence, those are very fascinating. And you know what?
Yes.
The Constitution looks nothing like the preamble of the Constitution suggested that it should be.
Yeah, and there was a lot of debates. There was anti-federalists who were being censored, just like we are getting censored now, for sharing alternative information. So it's no surprise. Again, this is, to me, just history on repeat. And I think there were many intellectuals who were very great and advanced, and there were people who were co-opting all sorts of things, just like what happens nowadays. So, again, it's hard to kind of examine the past. The abolitionists were even, sooner than them, and they gave us a lot of insights because they lived during that time period. So when you study them, you start to get a much bigger picture of what's really going on and how the foundation of America occurred, which, again, I haven't seen many historians talk about. The one historian that I do know about was Lewis Perry, who wrote a book called Radical Abolitionism, Anarchy in the Government of God and Anti-Slavery Thought, because the abolitionists said that slaves owe allegiance to God, and so that God's government is above that of man. And so, God is their true lawgiver, and that they owe allegiance to God, not to man. And so that was a way of using the church to break away from slavery, because most of the churches were pro-slavery at the time. They even had to oppose the church. So there were a lot of deists at the time. You look up Theism, right? There was a big movement of like, we got to break away from the church, no Bibles, no churches. Let's just interact with the laws of nature and through nature's God. So all of that was happening. And then after the 1800s, you see a similar theme where people are trying to find more about individual freedom. So we're moving in a gradual progression to more and more freedom if we follow this trend, but some people are still stuck in the past of saying, well, we have to go back to this way of doing things. And I think it's very important just to consider our options, right? And just to see what other perspectives are out there. Have you looked into the works of Larkin Rose and Mark Passio talking about the most dangerous superstition, the one true divide, or Jeremy Locke saying the end of all evil? These are big claims, but they're all talking about statism, which is this belief system, which is the root cause to why we are in the world that we live in right now. It's this belief in authority. People believing that certain people have this right. And seriously, look at how people treat Trump. They talk about him all day. They nonstop are thinking about all the facts about what he's doing as if they know the guy. And then sometimes it's like, oh, I got to talk to him. I got to speak with him. They act like this person's a god. They put them up as like a deity. Carl Jung said that it's state doctrine. He called it state slavery, and that people worship the state like they do a god. This is one of the leading psychologists in the world. But it's not just him. It's Abraham Maslow, who created the hierarchy of needs, who said what? The future society that is based in transcendence, the highest level of the hierarchy, is actually based on voluntary interaction. Well, look at the most famous scientist in the 1800s, Herbert Spencer, who coined the law of the survival of the fittest. Well, everybody says, oh, it's going to be the law of the jungle and crazy chaos without government. Yet he is saying that actually that allows us to be more morally advanced and evolve more into what we need to do, which is respect self-ownership, which is respect personal autonomy. That's a rule. Rules like morality and principles and God and nature, that outdoes anything that man can create. Man-made law, man-made authority. That's all BS. It's all an illusion. And it tricks people into thinking that is the God. That's what they now worship, right? So man is taking the place of God through government, and through the use of technology and technocracy, it's going to become even more evident that that's what they're doing.
Beautiful. Beautiful. Hey, Bruce, why don't you jump in here? I see some excitement.
I completely resonate with this particular message. So one of the questions that I would have would be, obviously you have depth of knowledge and grasp of all this type of information. What is the best way, you're talking about moving forward in the future, but breaking through these paradigms, right? Mm-hmm. Breaking through this indoctrination, brainwashing, education, whatever you want, that we have to have some authority, man-made authority, to be able to have a civilized society, if you will. What's the best, other than continually pounding and educating? Because most
real leadership.
Most people ain't going to get off the couch and do anything.
Real leadership.
Dig into
Show by example.
Yeah.
Show by what you're doing right now is leadership. Okay. Show by example. Educate others. If people like your ideas, they follow them. It's that simple. Voluntarily. You're not using violence, saying you have to comply with me because I said so, because I wear this crown, because I have this outfit. That's what people have believed in for thousands of years. Right. And then our American founding fathers said, oh, a monarchy, that's ridiculous. So let's create a new system. You see what I mean? So we're moving more in that direction, but we have to follow through with what they started. Okay, and that's why it's becoming more dangerous as time moves on, because people are still worshiping other human beings as if they're gods. So what is the solution? Well, look at the Quakers, look at the abolitionists, look at Gandhi, look at Martin Luther King Jr., and I've done video documentaries on all sorts of things like this. Civil disobedience, nonviolent resistance are the most effective strategies throughout history to create change. I guarantee you that among the people who watch this, or even among you guys have connections with some people in the truth community who have millions of subscribers, or even among, just bring all the different groups together, there's millions of people who consist in these spaces. It doesn't take more than 1% or 3% of the population to create a revolution throughout history. All it requires is people saying no. Rather than finding another strategy like, let's write our paperwork a certain way, let's use common law, and let's let's use this legalese and say things correctly. And then, oh, let's pass a new law or change the politician. Let's get down to the roots of it and stand firmly on our principles for God or nature or truth or that which we claim to serve, and say no to tyranny and say no to evil. And that is the only step out of this, is by saying no directly. And no, it's very courageous. And an influencer can do it overnight or within a week. If they get together with their community, say, hey, let's not pay taxes, or let's just not do this one statist act that promotes this belief in authority in this government that we have. But you can see a revolution happen very quickly, and it can happen already with the people that are in our networks. And I don't know how much, I have to say it for other people. I'm kind of putting it into action myself in case they can't do it and they're not courageous enough, because a lot of people have sponsors, so they're afraid of losing their sponsors and getting the word out and truly trying to change things. I mean, you look at the comment sections, people are like, what do we do? What are the action steps? Nobody's ever giving them action steps, and that is a big part of the problem. So permaculture is a huge action step. Let's grow food instead of lawns. There's more acreage in lawns than any crop in the world combined, and it has more poison on our lawns than anything else. We can shift these right there. We have an economic source. We have so much happening, the community coming together. You can do a lot with that. Jim Gail in Florida with his 50 acres is demonstrating that solution right now, inviting world leaders. He's got off-grid Airbnbs and grazing animals. I'll connect any of you guys with him if you want. He allows visitors from anywhere. He's in Orlando. You can fly to him too. I'm in Tampa. You can fly to me too. I got land recently in the area. We're building a community center. We're going to educate people in person, show people how to grow food. We're going to do it ourselves if other people won't do it. But an influencer can do this overnight. They can get together with their group. They can do public demonstrations. They can grow tons of fruit trees all over, the different public parks and different lands. They can do so much that they do not do. So, if you are an influencer out there, do reach out to us. We're actually creating an influencer council, Jim Gail and I, and we actually are creating a financial model around it so people can make money at the same time. By being a part of this council, we're trying to create different systems to get very strategic with this. We actually created one-page basically, based off of this book, one-page plans for like churches, prisons, or schools to implement this model, because if a school, prison, or church grows food on their property, and that creates a domino effect throughout the country or the world, you can see a radical shift in the way we use our resources and the way people are becoming healthier. It really gets down to a root cause, which is that we need food security. And when COVID happened, we had like 98% food security. Everybody's buying toilet paper on the shelf. It's not really going to help us. So, people see that there's some need and that there's going to be some problems, but then you got to act on it. Take that step. Permaculture is better than gardening. I wasn't into gardening. I'm like, farming, that's hard work. But permaculture is you put in the right plants, you use the intelligence, you use the technology at your fingertips to bring the right plants together and plant it correctly. That's a solution. Civil disobedience, the other solution. Voluntarism is the worldview solution, right? So there you have the two practical steps in the worldview solution. I think they all come together really quite nicely for people. And yeah, just saying no, it really is that simple. And so if I was elected to a position, I'd step down. I'd tell everybody else to step down too, because that's the only way getting out of it. You say, oh, well, I got to get rid of the laws. Well, then you have the authority to get rid of the laws. And now everybody's going to like you, and now they're going to worship you because you're doing everything that everybody wanted. You're just going to cause more of the problem. So in fact, you don't want Kennedy or Trump to do anything good for the world. In fact,
Cory, we got to jump. We're running a little bit behind, but thank you so much for hopping. We had Jim Gail on 2 years ago. We had him on this show.
Awesome.
So we know Jim well. Great.
I want to get your info because I'm in Tampa as well. So
beautiful.
I'm over in Clearwater. Man, we're going to need to hook up, brother.
Yeah. And thank you, everybody. I'm sorry if I went on. And also, if I'm making some really bold statements, some things that trigger anybody, that's great, okay? Because, we often talk about the people who are afraid of our information, and we say that they're close to what we have to share. So let's open our hearts to new information, to even where we are right now, if we truly want to evolve and try to change things in the world. Thank you.
Thanks,
I appreciate
Cory.
it.
I appreciate you.
Boom. Love that guy.
All right.